So we're going to pick back up, and we began. So before we do, it's review time. Let's see if you guys remember. So let's go back to the cosmological argument using the logical form. What is our first premise in the... Don't be looking. Don't be looking. That's cheating. I know. Come on now. Yeah. Gonna be looking. Griff, come on. Yeah, I know. I have to worry about him. Yeah. Okay, so in the cosmological argument, that one can be summed up as cause and effect. That's the basic premise behind it. What's the first premise? What are we attempting to prove here when we use what are we attempting to prove in the cosmological argument? We're trying to prove the existence of God, right? Okay, so premise one in the cosmological argument has to do with cause and effect. What's the first premise? What's that? Yeah, we got to get that key phrase in there. Everything that begins to exist, that began to exist, had a cause. Okay, so we add that qualifier just because we're talking about things that began to exist, which is everything. But everything that has a beginning, that began to exist, has a cause. Premise two. Now, premise one is universal truth. We don't have to spend a lot of time proving it, right? You're not going to have a hard time trying to convince anybody of that one. That's like universal truth, law, cause and effect. Premise two in the cosmological argument is no. Okay, let's go back to premise one. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Premise two, what's premise two in the cosmological argument? The universe what? The universe began to exist. Okay, therefore, the universe has a cause. Okay, so now on premise two, we need to be equipped with some things to state that we have reasons why we believe that the universe began to exist and that it's not eternal. Simple answers to that anybody, if you were having this discussion, you could easily Google, would be what? Would be facts that support the beginning, that the universe had a beginning. Okay, that's one. Yeah, the universe is expanding. So if something's expanding, that means most likely at one time it was at a central point. Even more basic than that. Okay, which is summed up by what? The first and second law of thermodynamics. So the first and second law of thermodynamics give us this concept that there's only so much energy in the universe, right? And once the gas tank runs empty, we're done. So the universe cannot be eternal because everything is winding down from an energy perspective. That would be easy to Google if you just, hey, just Google first and second law of thermodynamics. So you look at those things. There's a lot of other things. You could look at reasons why that we believe the universe began to exist. So logically following, then therefore the universe has a cause. So that we establish the cosmological argument. The reason that I'm coming back to this is so that it's familiar to you and you'd be able to use this in a discussion should someone say that they don't believe in God, that they believe that everything, they believe in Darwinism and materialism and things like that. There's a good chance you might run into somebody with that worldview, and this is going to help you to be equipped. Now, From there, we moved on to the teleological argument, when we just dipped our toe into it, with the idea of teleology being that of purpose and design. And so we had a logical form for that as well. So, thinking of design now, what would be premise one? What would be premise one in our logical form? What would be? Where'd you get that, Kelly? Yeah. Say that again? Yeah. Every what? Every design has had a designer. Universal truth, right? It's not hard to agree upon that. The universe shows evidence of design. Therefore, the universe had a designer. So, now, within these two arguments for God's existence, because when we talk about in the cosmological and the teleological argument, it gives us clues as to the nature of the first cause or the uncaused cause, or in this case, the designer. And this is important too, because once we start putting all these pieces together, then that leads us down a certain road. So in the cosmological argument, going back just to kind of help us put these pieces together, we said that if indeed the universe had a beginning, that if it was created out of nothing, then what did we say? There were three major things that were created in that initial moment of creation. What were they? Okay, so if time, space, and matter are created, then that which created, or who created, would need to be timeless, outside of time, spaceless, right, outside of space, and immaterial, not matter. Okay, so a timeless, spaceless, immaterial being, we know the nature of the universe and everything that's in it. It's incredibly complex. This ties into the teleological argument. The scope of the universe, so this creator or first cause or uncaused cause needs to be incredibly powerful and intelligent. So we have a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, all-powerful, all-knowing being that's also personal. When we say personal, meaning that we ask the question, why is there something rather than nothing? Because someone chose to create. A volitional choice, one of the categories of personhood is volition. And so we understand then that a personal being chose to create. So we have all these things that it's revealing to us about the nature of the first cause or the designer. And so we talked about the teleological argument, setting forth the logical form. If the universe shows evidence of design, it must have had a designer. The universe shows evidence of design, thus the universe must have had a designer. Now, this correct form of logical reasoning and the implications that flow from it have not escaped the attention of those who do not believe in God. Even unbelievers understand that one does not get a poem without a poet. Remember, we talked about this. A law without a lawgiver, and so on and so forth. So now, where we landed on this discussion was basically this. The disagreement between the person who believes in God and the person who does not has nothing whatsoever to do with whether design demands a designer. Rather, the point of contention is whether or not there is design in nature adequate to prove the conclusion that a designer does exist. So, is the universe and everything in it complex enough that would require a designer? And so that's where we need to be equipped on this subject. And so this is where the teleological argument comes into play. Now, our universe operates using exact scientific laws. So apparently now, if you've got enough money, you can get on a rocket and go to outer space. Right? Or if you're good friends with Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or all these guys, right? You want to go to outer space, you got enough money. So What allows them to do this is the fact that there are exacting scientific laws that we can launch rockets into space. The precision of the universe and the exactness of these laws that exist allows scientists to launch rockets to the moon with full knowledge that they will land within a few feet of their intended target. Now think, how is that possible if there's not some sort of truth to these laws? There has to be. To invest millions and millions and billions of dollars to launch a rocket in space or to put a rover on Mars or whatever these things that we talk about, no one would do this unless there was certainty in the laws that govern the universe. They know that in certain environments that if we do this, then this will be the result. If we engage a thruster a certain way while it's still in the atmosphere, then this will be the result. When it's outside of our atmosphere, totally different result because of the different characteristics and the laws that govern that's out, in outer space. We know these things, and they're able to work within these parameters to achieve something like landing a rocket on the moon. Now, such precision and exactness also allow astronomers to predict eclipses many years before they happen, or to determine when Halley's Comet will be seen again. The precision and complexity and orderliness within the universe are not in dispute. But while atheists willingly admit that there is complexity and even order, they are not prepared to say that there is design. So there's complexity and order, but we're not going to say it's design. Because they know that purposeful design demands a designer. Now, the question then is there evidence of design? The atheist claims that no such evidence exists. The theist, however, says there is evidence of design and offers the following information in support for that claim. We live in a tremendously large universe. While its outer limits have not yet been measured, it is estimated to be as much as 93 billion light years in diameter. A light year is the distance light travels in 1 year, moving at a speed of more than 186,000 miles per second. A light year is approximately 5.9 trillion miles. So 5.9 trillion miles times 93 billion. Not exactly sure what that number is, but it's up there. There are an estimated 2 trillion galaxies in the universe and innumerable stars. The Milky Way galaxy in which we live contains over 300 billion stars. And it's so large that even moving at the speed of light, it would require 100,000 years to travel across the Milky Way itself. Now remember, the Milky Way is one of 2 trillion galaxies. So 199,999,999,999 other galaxies than the Milky Way. If we drew a map of the Milky Way galaxy where we live and represented the Earth and Sun as 2 dots 1 inch apart. All right, so let's the Earth and the Sun 1 inch apart. All right. So, if we drew a map of the Milky Way where we live and represented the Earth and Sun as 2 dots 1 inch apart, thus on a scale 1 inch equals 93 million miles. The distance between the Earth and the Sun. We would need a map at least 4 miles wide to locate the next nearest star. So from here to Larry's. How far's no? How far is 4 miles from here? On this map, that's how far the next star is. 1 inch being 93 million miles. And a map that was 25,000 miles wide to reach the center of our galaxy. Without doubt, this is a rather impressive universe. While the size itself is impressive, so the size is impressive, but the design that's within that universe is even more impressive. The temperature inside the sun is estimated to be at over 20 million degrees Celsius. The Earth, however, is located at exactly the correct distance from the sun to receive the proper amount of heat and radiation to sustain life as we know it. If the Earth were moved just 10% closer to the sun, about 10 million miles, far too much heat and radiation would be absorbed. If the Earth were moved just 10% farther from the sun, too little heat would be available. Either situation would spell doom for the Earth. Now here's something that you may not realize. The Earth is rotating on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. So you have the axis of the Earth, and it's rotating at the equator at 1,000 miles per hour. We don't feel that, right? So the Earth itself is rotating at 1,000 miles per hour. Yet we don't even realize that. Now, and simultaneously, the Earth moving through its orbit is moving around the sun at 70,000 miles per hour. The Earth itself, you mathematicians get... Somebody Google it. I'm assuming. Yeah. We'll have to ask I'm assuming his research is correct on this. I didn't work out the math on that, but the fact that I would assume that maybe that's probably correct. Boom. The equator, that would require a big belt. So keep your drawers up. All right, so spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, moving at 70,000 miles per hour while it's rotating, right? 70,000 miles per hour through its orbit around the sun. That's how quickly we're moving right now. Yeah, 19 miles per second. While the sun and its solar system are whirling through space. So here's something that I never thought about. Our solar system is moving as well, because we kind of think, well, maybe the solar system it's where it's at. No, it's moving too. At 600,000 miles per hour. In an orbit so large that it has been estimated that it would take over 222 million years just to complete a single orbit. So the movement that is occurring now within the Milky Way itself it would take 220 million years for it to complete its one trip around. Now, interestingly, however, as the Earth moves in its orbit around the sun, it departs from a straight line by only 1/9 of an inch every 18 miles. If it departed 1/8 of an inch, we would become so near to the sun that we would be incinerated. If it departed by 1/10 of an inch, we would find ourselves so far from the sun that we would freeze to death. The Earth is about 240,000 miles from the moon, whose gravitational pull produces ocean tides. If the moon were moved closer to the Earth by just 1/5, the tides would be so enormous that twice a day they would reach 35 to 50 feet high over most of Earth's surfaces. What would happen if the rotation rate of the Earth were cut in half or doubled? If it were halved, the seasons would be doubled in length, which would cause such harsh heat and cold in much of the earth that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to grow enough food to feed the earth's population. If the rotation were doubled, the length of the season would be halved, causing the same kind of potential food shortage. The earth is tilted on its axis at exactly 23.5 degrees. If that tilt were reduced to zero, much of the earth's water would accumulate around the two poles, leaving vast deserts in their place. If the atmosphere surrounding the earth were much thinner, meteorites could strike our planet with greater force and frequency, causing worldwide devastation. Now, some other of these that I want to talk about and give a little more context to what these are. What we're talking about in this are these ideas that are called anthropic constants. Anthropic constants. Now, when you hear the word anthropic, what does that mean? Anthropic. You hear any root words there? Like we get the same word anthropology, anthro, right? So anthropology is the study of man. So anthropic would be pertaining to man. And so these anthropic constants are things that must be constant in our universe, in the entire universe, in order to support life here. Yes.
All of it's rotating. It's not just one universe, it's all of
Well,
the
you mean there's one universe, but you mean galaxies. Yes. Yes.
galaxies. You make a difference for our galaxy.
Exactly.
And that has to be intelligent.
Absolutely. Now, the other thing that should cause within us, a little bit of a side note here, to think that the constants that exist in the entire universe are in order to support life here. Tell me your life doesn't matter. Tell me you don't have purpose. The universe exists to support life here. And you're part of that life. That should cause us just to...
If it changes just a little bit, we can go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we're going to talk about some more of these. Now, so when we talk about that scientists are now finding that the universe in which we live is like a diamond-studded Rolex, right? If you ever get a chance to do this, it's a video on YouTube, shocker, where a guy, it's just looking down upon where this guy's, or maybe it's a lady, I don't know, that's taking apart a Rolex, cleaning it all and freshening it up and then reassembling it. Just, if you get a chance, watch it. Absolutely amazing. Every little minute little gear and piece inside that one watch. It's incredibly complex. And I was just amazed at that. And then you think about, well, that's just a watch. But the watch to begin with? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it just happened by accident in nature. Yeah. There's a field full of Rolexes somewhere. We need to find that field. Yeah. Except, yes. Right. Yep. Nope. Yes, yeah. So we're actually going to talk about gravitational force here in a little bit as one of these anthropic constants. Yeah, great point. So, when we talk about, scientists are now finding that the universe in which we live is like a diamond-studded Rolex, except the universe is even more precisely designed than the watch. In fact, the universe is specifically tweaked to enable life on Earth, a planet with scores of improbable and interdependent life-supporting conditions that make it a tiny oasis in a vast and hostile universe. These highly precise and interdependent environmental conditions, which are called anthropic constants, make up what is known as the anthropic principle. Anthropic comes from a Greek word that means human or man. The anthropic principle is just a fancy title for the mounting evidence that has many scientists believing that the universe is extremely fine-tuned or designed to support human life here on Earth. Now, how many of you, well, I'm pretty sure most, if everybody is familiar with the Apollo 13 mission, and we know about that, and most of us really know about it because we've seen the movie with Tom Hanks, right? Great movie. Now, we understand, now if you recall in that movie, what happened is that in that capsule, the lunar module that they were working within once things happened, that there were certain of those anthropic constants that they were having problems with, and they had to deal with those, otherwise they were going to die. So that one of those would be the oxygen level of the capsule. And tied to that was also the carbon dioxide level of the capsule, and dealing with what was happening there with their respiration. And then we talk about too that when they entered the atmosphere, they had a window roughly equivalent to that of a sheet of paper that they had to hit coming into the atmosphere. If they hit it too high, they'd skip off into space. If they hit it too low, they'd burn up. It was roughly equivalent to a sheet of paper. They had to hit that. And so you think about these constants that they were working within to support their own life, and it serves as a wonderful backdrop for these anthropic constants. Number one would be oxygen level. On Earth, oxygen comprises 21% of the atmosphere. So they're able to measure how much oxygen's in the atmosphere. That precise figure is an anthropic constant that makes life on Earth possible. If oxygen were 25%, what would happen? Think about this. What would happen if oxygen in our atmosphere was at 25%? 21 is where we're at. If it goes up by 4%, what would happen? Spontaneously, there would be fires everywhere. The oxygen, 4%, then there would be, everything would catch on fire way quicker. And there would also be that these spontaneous fires would erupt. Now, if it were 15%, human beings would suffocate. So anthropic constant number one is the oxygen level. So let's talk about anthropic constant two is the atmospheric transparency. So I want to keep up with you all here. Yeah. The small window the astronauts must hit when they're coming back in reflects the exacting standards by which the universe has been designed. While the atmosphere presents a re-entry problem for the astronauts, its present qualities are absolutely essential for life here on Earth. The degree of transparency of the atmosphere is an anthropic constant. If the atmosphere were less transparent, so if the light was not able to pass through as easily, not enough solar radiation would reach the Earth's surface. If it were more transparent, we would be bombarded with far too much solar radiation. So that would be the case. The atmospheric composition and precise levels of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and ozone are in themselves anthropic constants. So the third one is the Moon-Earth gravitational interaction. Now, if the interaction were greater than it currently is, if the Moon's gravity was working on us more, then the oceans, the tidal effects, the atmosphere, the rotational period would be way too severe. If it were less, orbital changes would cause climatic instabilities. In either event, life on Earth would be impossible. So the Moon, exactly where it is necessary for life here on Earth. 4 would be the carbon dioxide level. Now, if the CO2 level were higher than it is now, we'd have a runaway greenhouse effect which would develop and we'd all burn up. If the level were lower than it is now, plants would not be able to maintain effective photosynthesis. We'd all suffocate if that were the case. And the last one is gravity. Now, this one blows my mind. What's that? What's the law? Gravity? Yeah. Good grief, I can't even count all these. Okay. Our mathematicians are going to be okay, but the rest of us, this is a decimal. So this is tenths, hundredths, thousands. All right, if you can keep going, right? That's about it for me. Yeah, okay? You carry this all the way out down to 1. So each time we move away, we're getting tinier and tinier and tinier, smaller and smaller and smaller. This is 10,000. So that would be here. Okay. So if the gravitational force were altered either way by this factor, so if it's just that much more or that much less, this number, that's how exact it is. Right? If the gravitational force were altered by that percent, our sun would not exist. And therefore, neither would we. Just think about that for a moment. Gravitational force were altered by that. Either direction, we'd be toast. That is incredible precision. Now, so those are the examples of anthropic constants. Now, there's another one, the oceans. I didn't know this. So, on the Earth, where do we get most of our oxygen? Like the rainforest? Plants and trees? Yep. Yep. Well, I didn't know this. It is from plants when we talk about photosynthesis, right? Because the plants use the carbon dioxide we expel. They go through photosynthesis and produce oxygen. Well, we talk about like the plants that exist on the surface, like in, but the plants in the ocean provide 50% of the world's oxygen. Plants in the ocean. I didn't know that. Yeah, the oceans provide a huge reservoir of moisture that constantly is evaporating and condensing, thus falling upon the land as refreshing rain. It is a well-known fact that water heats and cools at a much slower rate than a solid land mass, which explains why desert regions can be blistering hot in the daytime and freezing cold at night. Water, however, holds its temperature longer and provides a sort of natural heating and air conditioning system for the land areas of the Earth. Temperature extremes would be much more unpredictable than they are now if approximately four-fifths of the Earth were not covered with water. In addition, humans and animals inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. On the other hand, plants take in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. We depend upon plants for our oxygen supply, yet we fail to realize that almost 50% of our oxygen supply comes from tiny plants in the seas. If our oceans were much smaller, we would soon be out of air to breathe. Now here's the question. Can a person reasonably be expected to believe that these exacting requirements for life as we know it have been met just by accident? The Earth is exactly the right distance from the sun. It is exactly the right distance from the moon. It has exactly the right diameter. It has exactly the right atmospheric pressure. It has exactly the right tilt. It has exactly the right amount of oceanic water. It has exactly the right weight and mass, and so on. If this many requirements were met in any other of life, the idea that they had been provided just by accident would be dismissed immediately as ludicrous. Yet, some people still suggest that the universe, the earth, and life on the earth are all here as a result of a lucky accident. Now, here's the thing. We need to realize this when we talk about probability. So if we take one of these constants, so let's just say that a constant is represented by the letter A. So these are the constants. So this constant, if you say the probability represented by the distance from the moon to the earth had to be just right in the gravitational pull. So that's that constant, and then you base probability on that. But if you add another probability, when you think of this, then it multiplies times another probability. And each time we add another anthropic constant, it increases the probability for these things having to be. So when we look at each time we add another one of these factors, it increases the probability of all these things being exactly as they are to sustain life, and it's off the charts. The probability, like 1 in whatever, a gajillion, find a little kid to say a number, right? That all these things would exist on a planet. Go ahead.
It's exponential.
Oh, yes.
Increase with each factor.
Yes, yes.
Because it's not just one times the other.
Right.
It's the set of possibilities within that one.
Right.
Times the set of possibilities
Right.
within the next one.
Yeah, so this is an exponential factor, so it just grows. It's crazy. So to find a planet, there's a book, I believe, that really talks about this. It's called The Privileged Planet, and we are privileged in the way that everything is designed for life to exist here. So, several years ago in Science Digest magazine, world-renowned physicist John Gribben published an article that stressed the importance of the facts like the ones mentioned that we've just mentioned, yet labeled his article this: Earth's Lucky Break. The famous British astronomer Sir Fred Hoyle, however, has suggested that the idea of randomness and disorder somehow giving rise to design and order is like saying that a tornado could sweep through a junkyard and assemble a Boeing 747 from all the scraps. So we have a nice junkyard, tornado comes through, and when it's all done, boom, a 747 sitting there. What's more complex, the universe or a jumbo jet? The universe. The statistical improbability of the universe just happening is beyond staggering. The only alternative is that it was created by an intelligent designer, and that being God. Now, that was the universe. Let's talk about the design of the human body. Yes. 4A, sure. 4A, anthropic. 4A, fine-tuned. Believing that the universe is extremely fine-tuned or designed to support human life here on Earth. The oceans. Gravity. Anyone else? All right, cool. So now, let's talk about design of the human body. Many years ago, the ancient scholar Augustine observed that, quote, men go abroad to wonder at the height of mountains, at the huge waves of the sea, at the long course of the rivers, at the vast compass of the ocean, at the circular motion of the stars, and they pass by themselves without wondering. Indeed, while we stand in amazement at so many stunning scenes from our unique universe, we often fail to stand amazed at the marvelous creation that is the human body. According to those who do not believe in God, the human body is the result of lucky circumstances set in motion by those mythical parents, Father Time and Mother Nature. Now, I don't know if we've already said this in this class. I've said it in other settings, but I'm of the opinion that those two words need not be uttered by a Christian person. Because when we talk about the mythical parents, we talk about naturalism, materialism. The earth is not our mother. From a materialistic, naturalistic standpoint, the earth is your mother. Father Time and Mother Nature. We need not use those terms. That's my humble opinion. Yet this suggestion does not fit the actual facts of the case. Can a person reasonably be expected to conclude that the masterpiece of the human body with its ingenious systems and amazing design is a result of blind chance operating over millions of years in nature as atheism suggests? Or is it more reasonable to suggest that the human body is a result of a purposeful design by a great designer? The human body may be considered at 4 different levels. 4 different levels. All right, where at? First, there are cells, representing the smallest unit of life. Second, there are tissues, muscle tissue, nerve tissue, etc., which are the groups of the same kinds of cells carrying on the same kind of activity. Third, there are organs, the heart, the liver, etc., which are groups of tissues working together in harmony. Fourth, there are systems, reproductive system, circulatory system, etc., which are made up of groups of organs carrying out specific bodily functions. While we will not have the space to examine each of them here, a brief look at the human body as a whole leads to the conclusion that there is intelligent design at work. Now, we talk about Darwin and what he had at his fingertips when he made his ideas and so forth. So on a molecular level, I can't even say the word, cellular, on the little level, yeah, that's hard. That's like saying rural, cellular. Hey, I'm admitting my shortcomings here, and that's that word. But at that level, Darwin had when they were able to look through the microscopes and the technology of his time, they were just able to see very little. They looked like tiny little blobs sitting next to each other. They had no idea what was going on inside of there. I mean, the microscopes that we have in elementary schools right now are better than what he had. Right? And so when we talk about electron microscopes and the things that are happening now, I'm convinced of this. If he was able to see that, he would have recanted if he was an honest scientist on his, because there's, when we know what's going on at that level, the human body is composed of over 250 different kinds of cells. Red blood cells, white blood cells, nerve cells, etc., totaling approximately 100 trillion cells in an average adult. 100 trillion. These cells come in all different shapes and sizes and perform many different tasks. For example, certain cells, like the male spermatozoa, are so small, each being only 0.05 millimeters long, that 20,000 of them would fit inside a capital O from a standard typewriter. Some cells placed end to end would make only 1 inch if 6,000 of them were assembled together. So 6,000 in an inch laid side to side, that's how many you could get there. Yet all the cells of the human body, if set end to end, would encircle the earth over 200 times. Even the largest cell of the human body, the female ovum, is unbelievably small, being only 0.01 of an inch in diameter. Cells have 3 major parts. First, each cell has a cell membrane that surrounds it. Second, inside the cell is a 3-dimensional cytoplasm, a watery substance containing specialized organelles. Third, inside the cytoplasm is a nucleus that contains most of the genetic material and serves as the control center of the cell. The cell membrane is approximately 0.06 to 0.08 of a micrometer thick, yet allows selective transport into and out of each cell. Now, last week, this is one of the things that I'm really fascinated with. I gave you some research I had done on this, and talking about the biological fingerprints of God's design. And so, within that design, if you have time, I would encourage you to sit down and engage with this a little bit. But we talk about the genetic material that's within each cell. We talk about language. We talk about messages and things like that. Do things like language or messages exist without intelligence? They do not. So what if you sat down with your alphabets in the morning, right? And you're just eating there and you're half asleep, coffee, and you look down and you see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z, all in order, right there in your bowl. Is that going to happen? Yeah. Or you might wonder what's in your coffee. Yeah. What's in here, right? Or if the message in your alphabet said, take out the trash. You're pretty sure your wife was involved with that, but how did she accomplish that, right? Messages just don't spontaneously. There is a mind, there is intelligence behind messages, behind information. Information doesn't exist outside of intelligence. And so on the molecular level, we understand that there are indeed molecular messages. I don't have time to get into all this, but I'll read you this quote from David Faust. In fact, this is pretty cool. David Faust used to be the president of Cincinnati Christian University, and his brother actually attended the class I taught at Hillsborough, which is pretty cool. And I'm trying to remember his first name. Right now, it's Mr. Faust. But David's brother, Mr. Faust, attended our class at Hillsborough, and that was pretty cool. But his brother wrote this: life requires a designer, especially human life. A single molecule of human DNA contains roughly the same amount of information as a volume of an encyclopedia. A single living cell functions like a tiny factory. Right? Your human body contains a highly complicated computer, brain, a pump, heart, a furnace, stomach, a camera, eye, musical instrument, ear, communication network, the nerves, all designed to move around on a flexible but sturdy structural framework, the bones, under a protective covering, the skin, that allows perspiration to escape when you exercise, but keeps water from pouring into your body while you bathe or swim. In recent years, scientists have spent thousands of hours and millions of dollars trying to analyze and map what's already there in one of Earth's simplest creatures. Wouldn't it require a divine effort to create what wasn't already there, including all the varied forms of life with all their complexity? The messages that exist within the cell, within the DNA, is absolutely remarkable. Yeah, here, listen to this. I have a book in there. It's called Signature in the Cell by Stephen Meyer. It's incredible. But it says this: the amount of information in a single, simple life amoeba, right? Now, have you ever just got some good old pond water and looked at it under a microscope? The little thing's swimming around in there and moving to and fro, right? Those single cell organisms, which are called simple life, aren't simple at all. In fact, according to experts, the amount of information stored in the DNA of a single amoeba contains the same amount of information in 1,000 sets of a given encyclopedia. Yeah. Now, Stephen Meyer, he expounds upon the capability and aptitude of a single strand of DNA. So one single strand of DNA that's present within that nucleus of that amoeba says this: it is certainly remarkable that DNA can carry and encode information using chemical subunits that function as alphabetical characters. So those letters are A, T, C, and G. Adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. I think it's cytosine. Cytosine. And so those amino acids arranged in certain orders produce certain things if they're in the proper order. And so those are alphabetical characters. It is also remarkable that DNA forms part of a communication channel that can be analyzed so readily using the mathematical tool of Shannon's information theory. Further, scientists have applied Shannon's information theory to generate quantitative measures of information carrying capacity. So all this information, the capacity that can happen of the amount of information in just 4 letters arranged in different orders and then connected in it, it's just incredible what can be produced. So, and they create proteins. The analyses have shown that these molecules are highly complex and quantifiably so. DNA, RNA, and proteins have tremendous capacity, at least, to store and transmit information. Now, when you really start to understand what's happening inside of one cell, it's absolutely crazy. So you have a DNA molecule, right? That, have you seen it's like a helix? It's like 2 things like this that have interconnecting, right? So it has A, G, T, C, and all these different things that are connected to other ones on the other side, and it's in a helix. So what happens is there's things in the cell that actually unwind that helix, separate it, and then the RNA molecule comes in and assembles up to it, and they match up. There's actually like a factory where that's replicated. The RNA comes in, matches up, grabs that, and then it unattaches from what it makes, and then it takes what it replicated, and it leaves and goes somewhere else to do its thing, and then the DNA is reassembled back together. But that's by accident. That evolved over time, that whole process. Go ahead.
It's not only just information, it's also structural code that actually is communicated and delivered and then replicated.
Yes. So these.
It's not just information. This is
Yeah. So.
active communication.
Right. And somehow everything knows exactly where to go and what to produce and what to make. So if what's happening is required to make an ear, then it does exactly what it's required to make an ear. Or in a single-cell organism like another single-cell organism. And so now in a nucleus and within a cell, there's other things that are taking place. There's energy. There's a power plant inside that cell. There's waste. There's waste disposal things that if those waste disposal, if the garbage man ain't running inside the cell, it's going to eventually be overrun with toxins and die. There's also transportation that's taking place within the cell. So all the things that you would see in a major city that exist within a major city, for a city to exist, transportation, manufacturing, power, all that exists in a cell.
If that doesn't work, is that cancer?
Oh gosh, I don't. You mean if one function of a cell? I don't know exactly. I don't know enough about cancer to
You know what I'm saying?
say the word cellular for me. That level, I don't know exactly, but
It's there.
different kinds of cancers. Yeah, but I mean it happens at that level. But whether or not if one of those functions is not operating correctly, I don't know. But I'm sure. Yeah, you're supposed to know this. No, you're not You're not an oncologist. Yeah, me neither. But I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. Anyway, the things that are happening in a single cell are incredible. We're going to talk next week when we get back together. We'll talk some about this concept called irreducible complexity, and irreducible complexity illustrated by what's called a bacterial flagellum. And when we understand what's happening with that, bacterial flagellum is basically its tail, a tail of a single-cell organism that it uses to propel itself through this aqueous environment. And so understanding what's happening in that flagellum itself, again, this concept of irreducible complexity, we'll talk about that, and we'll illustrate it a little bit next week as we get back together. So that's where we're going to leave off for tonight.